Hi everyone, my name is Jo and I love to read. Today I'm going to be doing my May 2021 reading wrap up. I had a pretty good reading month in May, sort of similar to April where I'm trying to push through my physical TBR, so I'm really interested to be reading. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens to my reading when I'm actually able to pick books that I'm super excited about all the time, to see whether I end up being a quicker reader and dedicate more time to reading, or whether I'll just continue at my normal pace. So the first book that I finished this month is the unofficial Ultimate Harry Potter Spellbook. This is one of the books that Daniel bought me when he was working a lot last year. I think it was a really good size for a non-fiction book about a fiction universe. This book was actually done in a pretty interesting way for its content, because under each spell it talks about what type it is, how to pronounce it if it's hard to pronounce, the use, etymology, which is whether like it comes from some kind of language like Latin or something like that. But then the really cool bits is that there is a magical moment where it talks about where that book has been used throughout the series or throughout like the video games or anything like that, why it's included in here, where does it appear in the Wizarding World universe. And then it's got notes on it, which is just like some more interesting information. So that kind of helped it be a little bit less boring being a list. Like, I'm not saying that necessarily it could be boring, but because it is just a list of spells, like we're not actually in a story at all. So I was pretty happy with the way that they decided to format that, and it's a pretty lovely, pretty book for my Harry Potter collection. So thanks, Daniel, for buying that for me. The next book I finished was Cindy's Last Hope, book number 54 in the Thoroughbred series. The Thoroughbred series is created by Joanna Campbell, but this one is written by Mary Anderson. This was such a surprise of a book. So there's not often a lot of depth in the Thoroughbred books. It's just a fun middle grade series that I enjoy reading because I really love horses. But this one had a lot of depth, and I was actually really not looking forward to reading this volume because Cindy, the main character that's featured in this book, is such a whinger, and she's someone that a lot of the girls in this series that the main series is based on are a bit sort of obnoxious because they believe that they know what's best and they're the ones that have the special bonds with these horses and nobody else knows what they're doing. But Cindy has always been very frustrating because of her attitude, and I was expecting to just be hating this volume because of Cindy, because of this main character. But there was actually a lot of depth, which is nice, because she gets thrown into a situation where, to begin with, part of her backstory is that she has injured herself, her shoulder so bad that she can't race anymore or ride racehorses, and this is really horrible because she was a really renowned jockey, and she's got this backstory where she's carrying so much pain, much more than your average sort of middle grade horse novel character. But then also the guy that's on the cover here, she's trying to find someone who can ride her horse, but because it's such an unruly, crazy horse, the only one that can do it is this obnoxious exercise rider who was like, oh, I could be the best jockey in the world. And she's like, no, like, you don't know what you're talking about. But the irony is there in the series, because that is what Cindy's like. When she was younger, she's like, well, I know my horse best. And everyone was like, no. But when she gets thrown into this kind of role, she does become sort of almost like the villain of the story, because in the end, it ends up, she does let this guy ride a horse and they go to victory and all that kind of thing. But it was just really funny, the roundabout way that it took to get there and the irony of it. So I enjoyed the depth in that one. The next book I read was Oakleaf Bearers, which is the fourth in the Ranger's Apprentice series by John Flanagan. Unfortunately, I only gave this book 3 stars, even though I did push through and finished it. The reason I sort of was wanting to DNF it, I was already tired from having read the previous book, the third book in this series. So when I was coming into this one, I had actually decided to continue reading it because my cousin actually bought this book for me for Christmas, and she really struggled to try and find it because I really wanted it, and at the time that I put it on my wish list, I did really want it because I thought that I was really going to enjoy the series. But after having that bad experience with the third book, I was just kind of like, yeah, I guess I'll read this, and I found myself already not really caring what happened to the characters, and that was at the point that I was going to DNF it. But then there was something that just, it was like I was thinking about how much I enjoyed the first and the second book, and being with Holt and learning about being rangers in the forest outside of Araluen and you know, shooting with bows and arrows because they're my preferred method, and riding this horse that's trained super well like rangers. It just, that whole atmosphere I loved about the first and second books. Ultimately, like I said though, I ended up picking it up again and I read through it, and it was fine. It was okay. But there were negative undercurrents at the end of there were negative undercurrents that just made me not want to finish the series when I ended up finishing this book. And ultimately, I have decided to DNF and unhaul this series. I don't want to go into a lot of details about it because I want to talk about that in my unhaul video, and I don't want to sort of bore you guys with the details. But I had sort of two main points. One, the absence of women in this series in the world is just horrendous. Like, so we're in Scandia, which is a Viking town, or a Viking country, sorry. We're in a Viking country, and there is no women. None. There is a female main character who is friends with the protagonist, but I feel like she's a token female. And aside from that, there's no women. So I don't really want to continue to read this series because I just think it's going to be mediocre. But I don't want to keep them around for my future kids, especially if they're boys and they're reading this, learning that women don't really have a place in the world like this. The other thing that I had a real problem with this book is that the evil people in it are just evil. Like they're just evil, and there's no reason why. We even get perspectives from their point of views, and you don't actually get an explanation as to what they want or why they're invading this country. But on top of the villains being boring, we're also aligned with Vikings. Vikings who, as a nation and a culture, pillage and plunder, murder, assault, steal. They're not good people. So why, I found it very difficult that we're supposed to be buddies with them when we don't even have a real reason for not liking the other people. Like, they are invading, but why are they invading? What are they looking for? It's alluded to that they're looking for something, but we don't know what. And why am I supposed to feel sympathy for these Vikings when basically they're just getting a taste for their own medicine? So that, like, all those undercurrents is why I don't want to continue with the series. And that the last two books were a bit mediocre, including this one. So I'm going to stop talking about this now because I'll be doing an unhaul and I don't want to completely talk about everything that I want to. The next book that I finished was The Ruby Circle by Richelle Mead, which is the sixth and final book in the Bloodline series. This one I actually read on audiobook. I didn't mind it. It was sadly a bit of a weak conclusion to a series that, again, if you've been watching my videos lately, you'll know that I've been loving this series. So it was kind of sad that the last volume wasn't as strong. I feel like Richelle Mead could have made the previous book just a bit longer to answer some of the questions that we had, and it would have been perfect. I don't know if she felt pressured because so this is a spin-off series to the Vampire Academy, and the Vampire Academy was 6 books. So I don't know whether she was contracted to write 6 books and then just kind of ran out of steam. It was okay. But as I've talked about before in other videos when I've talked about the series, the previous book ends on a cliffhanger, and it really disappointed me, the cliffhanger that it ended on, because it felt like a redo of the previous book, but in a bad way, even though I love the previous book, but they just didn't do it very well. And it was kind of a bit of a full circle thing because there's a thing that throws all the characters together in an earlier book, and this kind of like brings it up again. So maybe it has a nice symmetry to it, but I just didn't find it that interesting. I listened to it on audio to get through it because I really wanted to finish my physical TBR. I was enjoying it on audio, and there are some big revelations for people that read Vampire Academies and have now continued on to this series. Like, there are things in the series that are just like, oh my god. And they're a little bit soapy. Like, one of the things is a little bit soapy, to be honest. But, you know, I enjoyed the drama and the shock factor of it. So that part of the book I really enjoyed. It's just the main plot line I was a bit like, I don't really care. So, you know, it was a disappointing conclusion to the series, but it wasn't terrible. I'd probably at best just give it 3 stars. It was okay. And now my final book that I'm talking about is the second of this kind of it's not, I think it's like a series, but it's not like numbered like a series because they're non-fiction of the fiction world. But the second one that Daniel bought me and the final one that he did, which is the unofficial Harry Potter character compendium. It's MuggleNets, which is a website, ultimate guide to who's who in the wizarding world. These are published by Media Lab Books, by the way, in case you're wanting to know. This one was a bit harder to get through because it's really thick, and it is literally a character compendium. Like any name or character, including animals, because they're characters too, that have been mentioned in the Harry Potter universe is in this book. So it is very, very vast. And my steam reading this book sort of kept going along at a steady pace. I do have this feeling, like I still do because this is the most recent book that I finished, but I had this feeling throughout it, probably the second half, that I really, really wanted to read an actual story. Like I didn't want to just keep reading facts. I wanted to read a story. So I feel like it's a bit chunky, even though it's, you know, it's complete. It's finishing everybody in it, and it has until, you know, maybe something else is published, but it's got things like, it's even got the Cursed Child editions in here, even though I know some people don't consider that canon. So I'm a bit undivided. For me, if the author has ratified it, then it's canon, even if it's bad canon. But anyways, that's debatable. That's debatable. It was a fantastic play to see. It was good for thematics, but not storyline is not super great, but I just enjoyed it for like the fun of going to the theatre. I probably do recommend this to, and the other book as well, to any big Harry Potter fans. They were fun. I've learnt some more information about the world that maybe I'll forget about, but it was cool to learn it at the time. I'm also planning on doing a video which is unusual facts that I have learnt about when reading this book, the spell book, and that book there, which is another non-fiction about this fiction world. So I'm going to do a video like that because that was fun. But yeah, check it out if you're interested in learning more details. You could probably not read it all in one like length of time like I did, how I picked it as my main book. You could probably read other books in between, but I didn't want to lose my steam. So that is everything. Thanks so much, you guys, for watching this video. Hi everyone, Editing Joe chiming in here because I forgot to talk about my stats as I am finishing my physical TBR. So as of finishing the Harry Potter character compendium, I have read 3,203 pages. Now my target to be done by the end of August, I needed to be up to 1,960 and I'm at 3,000, which is awesome. Am I above my stretch goal this month? No, actually I'm not. So my stretch goal to be done at the end of June, which is next month, oh my gosh, is 3,626 and I'm up to 3,203 pages. So I'm a bit behind by about 400 pages. I'm probably, unless these books turn out to be amazing, I probably won't catch up. And I had kind of guessed that I would be mid-July-ish that I'll be finishing, but that's still really crazy. And who knows, maybe I'll get inspired. I have a lot of shorter books to go, so maybe that'll spur me on to read more, but we'll see. Thanks for following me on the journey, but I just wanted to add that in, and now back to the rest of the video. Tell me how your reading went in May. Did you get everything read that you wanted to? Is there any favourites, any unfavourites? Was it just a meh month? Let me know in the comments below, and I will talk to you guys in another video. Bye!